We're looking at how to make plain form verbs in this video. We're going to start with must form verbs. That's the polite form of verbs, but we're going to turn them into plain form verbs because when we use verbs within grammatical patterns or when we're talking with our friends and family, then we actually use the plain form of verbs. Another word for plain form is also dictionary form because that's how verbs appear in the dictionary. Let's begin by having a look at group 1 verbs. They're the hardest, so let's get them over and done with first. Let's use the verb kaimasu, to buy, as our first example. Now this is a 2-step process. The first thing that we do is make the verb stem from kaimasu, and the way we do that is remove the mas from the verb. That leaves us with a verb stem, kai. The next step is to take the final hiragana letter in the verb stem, in this case it's I, and we're going to change it from its I form to its U form. Now that sounds a little difficult, but let me show you what I mean. Now here's a hiragana chart, and you can see the rows go across with 5 vowels each time. So a, I, u, e, o, kaki, kuke, ko, sashi, su, se, so, and so on. And each row has a different consonant beginning that row. Now, to change the last hiragana of the verb stem from the I form to the U form is as simple as identifying the last hiragana, in this case it's I, and simply changing it to the U form, which you find right next to it on the hiragana chart. In the case of ka-I, we need to change it to ka-U. So we're going to remove that I and replace it with U. And that gives us ka-U, or the plain form for to buy. Let's have a look at another example. Kakimasu, to write. First step, remove the mas to make the verb stem. Next step, identify the final hiragana in the verb stem, which is ki. Then change ki to the U version, which is ku. So let's do that. We're going to remove the ki and replace it with ku. And there we have kaku, to write in the plain form. Let's have a look at hanashimasu, meaning to speak. Okay, step 1, remove the mas. Step 2, identify the final hiragana in the stem, which is shi. And finally, change the shi to the U sound in that row, which is su. So let's remove that shi and replace it with su. Hanasu, the plain form of to speak. Let's try another slightly difficult one. Machimasu. Remove the mas, identify the final hiragana, which is chi, change chi to the U version in that row, which is tsu, and replace chi with tsu. Okay, that's chi gone, and that's tsu, so matsu, to wait. And let's finish with a fairly straightforward one. Nomimasu, remove the mas, remaining hiragana is mi. Let's check what mi changes to in its U form. There's mi, it changes to mu. Let's remove the mi, and there we have mu, giving us nomu, the plain form of to drink. Now let's look at how to make the plain form of group 2 verbs. Now unfortunately there's no rule to help you remember which verbs are group 1 and which verbs are group 2, but the good news is there are very few group 2 verbs and they're quite easy to remember. So let's start off with the most important group 2 verb, and that's tabemasu. Now to turn a group 2 verb into its plain form is incredibly easy. All you do is you make the verb stem by removing the mas and you replace it with ru, and you get taberu, the plain form of to eat. Let's have a look at another important group 2 verb which you can simply remember, and that is mimasu. Let's turn it into its verb stem by removing the mas and replace that with lu, and we get miru, the plain form of mimasu, to see. Another important group 2 verb is imasu, which means to be or to exist. Or sometimes it means I have when you're talking about members of your family. It's used about living things. Let's change it to its plain form by removing the mas and replace it with ru, iru, the plain form of to exist. Finally, we have okimasu, to wake up. Let's remove the mas to make the stem and replace it with ru, okiru, to wake up. You'll notice with each of these group 2 verbs that the final hiragana of the verb stem, or if there's only one hiragana in the verb stem, then it applies to that as well. But that is either an e hiragana or an I hiragana. Now, unfortunately, this is not a rule because sometimes e hiragana stems and I hiragana stems happen to be group 1, but all of group 2 verbs either have an e sound at the end of the stem or an I. Now that can help you somewhat. And finally, we have the group 3 verbs, and they are the irregular ones, but there's only 2 of them. And here they are: shimasu, which becomes suru in the plain form, and kimasu, to come, which becomes kuru in the plain form. So those are your 2 irregular verbs: suru, to do, and kuru, to come. And that's plain verbs.